Greetings, dear traveller, and welcome to this quiet haven of history, where the echoes of the past hum softly like a lullaby. As you settle into the gentle embrace of your blankets, perhaps with the glow of a bedside lamp casting a warm pool of light, let us embark on a journey together, back to the frozen heart of medieval Europe. Here in a time long faded, winter was no mere season, it was a formidable presence, a silent force that tested the courage and endurance of every soul. I'm so glad you've chosen to join me tonight, whether you're nestled in a cozy corner of the world, ready to drift into dreams, or simply seeking a moment of peace with a tale that wraps you in its calm embrace. If you feel a spark of connection to these stories, I'd love for you to share a little piece of your evening. Where are you listening from, and what hour does the clock whisper to you? Drop a note in the comments below. It's a delight to weave our far-flung threads into a tapestry of history lovers. And if these gentle tales of yesteryear soothe your spirit, consider subscribing to our little community so we can wander through more chapters of the past together. For now, let the weight of today's worries slip away, like snowflakes melting on a warm hearth, as we step into a world where winter's icy breath held sway over all. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a medieval village, the air sharp and crisp, carrying the faint, brittle scent of frost. The world around you is hushed, as if nature itself is holding its breath, preparing for the long, unyielding months ahead. The trees, stripped bare by autumn's relentless hand, stand like silent sentinels, their branches clawing at a sky draped in mournful grey. The sun, a pale and distant orb, hangs low on the horizon, its rays too weak to pierce the chill that settles over the land. Frost glitters on the fields, each blade of grass encased in a delicate sheen of ice, crunching softly beneath your boots as you take a tentative step forward. A gentle breeze stirs, weaving through the skeletal branches, and with it comes the first tentative flakes of snow, drifting down like whispers from the heavens, soft and weightless, yet heavy with the promise of winter's dominion. The landscape feels alive, yet still, a paradox of motion and quiet, as if the earth is bracing itself for the cold that will soon envelop it entirely. In this forgotten time, winter was not just a season, it was a trial, a relentless challenge that seeped into every corner of life. The rivers, once flowing with the laughter of summer, now freeze into gleaming mirrors, their surfaces cracked and clouded, reflecting the dim light of a world turned inward. Ponds become solid sheets of ice, their edges fringed with delicate patterns that shimmer in the rare moments when the sun breaks through. The fields, once vibrant with the green of growing things, now lie barren, blanketed in frost that sparkles like 1,000 tiny stars under the moon's pale gaze. For the people of this era, winter's arrival brought a quiet dread, a knowledge that the months ahead would test their strength, their resourcefulness, and their hope. In a time before the hum of central heating, before insulated walls and electric lights, warmth was a fleeting dream, a luxury reserved for the fortunate few. Most lived in homes of wattle and daub, their walls thin and porous, offering little defense against the cold that crept through every crack and crevice. The fire in the hearth, if one could be kept alight, was a precious lifeline, its flickering glow a small act of defiance against the darkness and chill that pressed in from all sides. Picture a small village, nestled in a valley where the hills rise like gentle guardians, their slopes dusted with the first snows of the season. The houses huddle close together, as if seeking comfort in their proximity, their thatched roofs sagging under the weight of frost. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys, a sign of life within, as families gather around meagre fires, their breath misting in the air as they speak in hushed tones. The livestock, too, feel the weight of winter. Cows and sheep huddle in barns, their coats matted with frost, their breath steaming in the dim light. The village is a world unto itself, isolated by the snow that begins to pile at its edges, cutting it off from the wider world. The roads, once bustling with carts and travellers, now lie silent, their ruts hidden beneath a blanket of white. The silence is profound, broken only by the occasional creak of a frozen branch or the distant howl of a wolf, a reminder of the wildness that lurks beyond the village's fragile boundaries. In this age, survival was a daily act of will. The harvest, carefully gathered in the golden days of autumn, was the only bulwark against starvation. Every sack of grain, every bundle of dried herbs, was a treasure, hoarded and rationed with meticulous care, The livestock, vital to the village's survival, depended on dwindling stores of hay, their survival as precarious as that of the humans who tended them. The cold was a relentless adversary, seeping into bones, numbing fingers and toes, and turning even the simplest tasks into trials of endurance. Fetching water meant breaking through ice, gathering wood meant braving the biting winds, and every step outside was a gamble against the elements. Yet, amidst this hardship, there was a quiet beauty to the medieval winter, a stark and haunting elegance that spoke to the resilience of those who lived through it. The snow, though cruel, transformed the world into a canvas of white, its purity a fleeting gift before the struggles of the season took hold. As you imagine this scene, let your mind linger on the details, the crunch of frost underfoot, the faint glow of a fire through a window, the soft patter of snow against a thatched roof. Feel the weight of the modern world lift from your shoulders, replaced by the stillness of a time when life was simpler, yet infinitely harder. The medieval winter was a season of contrasts, harsh and unyielding, yet strangely intimate, drawing people together in their shared struggle. The villagers, bound by necessity, relied on one another, their lives intertwined in ways we can scarcely imagine today. A neighbor's fire might mean the difference between warmth and frostbite, a shared meal the difference between hunger and survival. In this world, every spark of warmth, every moment of connection, was a victory, a small rebellion against the cold that sought to claim them. Let your thoughts drift to the people of this time. Their faces weathered by the wind, their hands rough from labor, yet their spirits unbroken. They lived in a world where the seasons dictated the rhythm of life, where winter was not just a backdrop but a force to be reckoned with. As the snow falls thicker now, blanketing the village in a hush that feels almost sacred, you can almost hear their voices, soft murmurs of stories told by the fire, prayers whispered for spring's return, and the quiet resolve to endure. The medieval winter was a crucible, forging bonds of community and resilience that would echo through the ages. As we linger in this moment, the world outside your window fades, and you stand on the threshold of a story that unfolds across a frozen landscape, where every breath is a testament to the human spirit's unyielding will to survive. As the snow falls softly over our imagined medieval village, blanketing the world in a hush that feels almost sacred, let us linger in this frosty past, where winter's embrace grew colder and more relentless than ever before. The medieval world, already a tapestry of struggle and survival, once knew seasons that danced in a gentler rhythm, summers that warmed the fields into golden abundance, winters that chilled but did not break the spirit. But then, as if the earth itself sighed a colder breath, the climate began to shift, heralding a time that history would call the Little Ice Age. From the 14th century, its icy tendrils stretched across centuries, wrapping Europe in winters harsher than any in memory. Picture the landscape transforming under this new cold. The air sharp with frost, the rivers frozen into silent mirrors. Let your mind drift through this frozen world, as we explore a time when winter became not just a season, but a formidable force that reshaped lives with its unyielding chill. The Little Ice Age was no fleeting frost. It was a slow, creeping change that settled over the land like a heavy cloak. The skies grew heavier, draped in clouds that seemed to press down upon the earth, dimming the sun's faint light. Temperatures fell, not in a single dramatic plunge, but in a gradual, relentless decline that disrupted the delicate balance of life. Fields that once bloomed with wheat and rye now lay locked in frost, their soils unyielding even as spring approached. Rivers, the arteries of trade and travel, froze solid, their surfaces gleaming under the weak winter sun, no longer carrying barges, but instead hosting makeshift markets and fleeting moments of revelry. The wind, once a gentle companion, turned sharp and biting, whistling through villages with a cruelty that seemed almost personal. Scholars today still ponder the causes. Perhaps volcanic ash clouded the skies, or ocean currents shifted, or the earth itself tilted in some subtle way. Whatever the reasons, the Little Ice Age left its mark on every soul, from the humblest peasant to the mightiest lord, binding them in a shared struggle against a world grown colder. Imagine a farmer standing at the edge of his field, his cloak pulled tight against the wind, his eyes scanning the horizon for signs of relief that never comes. The crops he planted with hope in the spring have withered under an early frost, their stalks brittle and lifeless, a silent testament to the season's betrayal. His granary, once a source of pride, now holds only a meager store of grain, barely enough to see his family through the long months ahead. His wife, her hands chapped from cold, sorts through the dwindling supplies, her face etched with the quiet fear of scarcity. Their children, bundled in whatever scraps of cloth they can spare, huddle by a fire that struggles to warm their small, smoky cottage. The livestock, too, bear the weight of winter, their breath steaming in the barn, their ribs stark against their frost-covered coats. This was the reality of the Little Ice Age, a time when winter's grip tightened, testing the resilience of those who faced it with little more than determination and hope. One of the most haunting stories from this era is the Great Frost of 1709, a winter so fierce it etched itself into the annals of history. Across Europe, the cold descended like a shroud, freezing the land in a grip that seemed unbreakable. In London, the River Thames, the city's beating heart, became a frozen highway, its surface solid enough to bear the weight of carts and stalls. Merchants set up shops on the ice, their voices mingling with the laughter of children skating in the pale sunlight. Bonfires crackled, their flames a defiant stand against the cold, casting fleeting warmth over a surreal scene of life, persisting in the face of nature's wrath. Yet, beyond the city's fleeting merriment, the cost was heavy. In rural villages, families huddled in homes that offered no true shelter, their breath visible in the air, their bodies shivering despite layers of tattered wools. The cold claimed lives with a quiet efficiency, sparing neither the young nor the old. As frostbite and hunger stalked the land, villages became islands, cut off by snowdrifts that buried paths and silenced trade, leaving communities to fend for themselves in a world of white. But even in these dark times, there were glimmers of light, moments when the human spirit shone through the frost. Consider the story of a young scholar, sent home from a university closed by the cold of 1709. In a quiet farmhouse, far from the bustling lecture halls, he sat by a sputtering fire, his mind alight with questions. The silence of winter, though harsh, offered a rare gift, time to think, to dream, to ponder the mysteries of the world. Wrapped in a worn blanket, his breath misting in the chilly air, he scratched out ideas that would one day change the course of knowledge. This scholar, a young man named Isaac Newton, used these frozen months to lay the groundwork for theories that would illuminate the laws of the universe. Picture him, his quill moving slowly in the dim light, the snow piling high outside as he wove thoughts of calculus and optics into the fabric of history. In the stillness of winter, amidst the hardship, a spark of genius flickered, a reminder that even the coldest seasons could nurture moments of brilliance. The Little Ice Age reshaped every facet of medieval life. Harvests, once reliable, became unpredictable as frosts lingered into spring and rains drowned summer crops. In the countryside, the hum of mills fell silent, replaced by the creak of frozen timbers and the sighs of those who faced empty larders. Livestock perished in the cold, their loss a blow to families who depended on their milk and labor. Markets, once vibrant with the colors of fresh produce, stood quiet, their stalls bare, their merchants' faces drawn with worry. For the poorest, hunger was a constant shadow, a gnawing ache that drove them to forage for nettles and wild herbs in the frozen woods. In towns, craftsmen struggled to work with numb fingers, their tools slipping in the cold, while taverns grew quiet as people sought the meager warmth of their homes. The church bells, which once called the faithful to prayer, now tolled for those lost to the season's cruelty, their mournful notes echoing over snow-covered rooftops. Disease thrived in the Little Ice Age's winters, spreading through cramped, smoky homes where families huddled for warmth. A cough could turn to pneumonia, a fever to a death sentence. As the cold weakened bodies already strained by hunger, the elderly, their joints aching in the damp, faced winter with a quiet dread, knowing their strength was waning. Children, their small bodies wrapped in thin cloaks, were especially vulnerable, their laughter silenced by illness or want. In some years, entire communities were hollowed out, their losses mourned in silence as the snow fell relentlessly. Yet, amidst this hardship, there were acts of quiet defiance, families sharing their last loaf of bread, neighbors braving the cold to deliver firewood, monks opening monastery doors to the freezing and destitute. These small gestures, like embers in the dark, kept hope alive, reminding people that they were not alone in their struggle. The Little Ice Age forced medieval society to adapt, to find new ways to endure. Farmers learned to preserve every scrap of food, salting meat and drying herbs with a care born of necessity. Homes, when resources allowed, were built with thicker walls, their hearths stoked with carefully rationed wood. Yet, no preparation could fully shield them from winter's wrath. The cold was a constant companion, a reminder of nature's power over human lives. In the quiet of the night, as the wind howled and the snow drifted against the walls, people prayed for spring, for the first signs of thaw that would signal the end of their ordeal. The lengthening of days, the softening of the earth, the delicate snowdrops pushing through the frost, these were the promises that sustained them, the whispers of a world that would awaken once more. As you listen, let your thoughts drift through this frozen landscape, where the air is sharp and the nights endless, but the human spirit burns with a quiet strength. Picture the villagers, their faces lit by the glow of a struggling fire, their voices soft as they share tales of summers past. Feel the weight of their challenges, but also the warmth of their resilience, the unspoken vow to endure. The Little Ice Age was a time of trial, but it was also a time of hope, of finding light in the darkest of winters. As the snow falls thicker now, blanketing the world in silence, let this tale carry you deeper into the past, where the cold shaped lives but could not break the will to survive. As the snow falls thicker now, wrapping our imagined medieval village in a silent, icy embrace, let us draw closer to the heart of this frozen world, where the common folk faced winter's wrath with little more than grit and hope. Picture a humble cottage, its walls of wattle and daub trembling against the wind, the faint glow of a fire struggling to warm the air within. For the peasants and serfs who made up the backbone of medieval society, winter was not a season of cozy retreat, but a relentless trial, a daily battle against cold, hunger, and disease. As you settle deeper into your blankets, let the soft rhythm of this tale carry you into their lives, where every spark of warmth was a hard-won victory, and every day a testament to the unyielding strength of the human spirit. In this time, the common folk lived close to the earth, their lives tied to the cycles of planting and harvest, their survival a delicate balance that winter threatened to shatter. Imagine waking in the dim light of dawn, your breath clouding in the chilly air of a one-room cottage. The straw mattress beneath you is thin, offering little comfort against the cold that seeps up from the earthen floor. Around you, your family huddles together, their bodies pressed close for warmth, their faces pale and pinched from the chill. The fire in the hearth, fed by a precious few sticks of wood, sputters weakly, its smoke curling upward to mingle with the frosty air. Your fingers, stiff and numb, fumble with a tattered cloak as you rise, careful not to disturb the sleeping forms around you. The cold is a constant companion, creeping through every crack in the walls, numbing your toes and stinging your cheeks. This was the reality for most in medieval times, a life where winter's bite was felt in every moment, every task, every breath. Breakfast, if you're fortunate, might be a meagre bowl of porridge, its warmth fleeting in the icy air, or a crust of stale bread, hard as stone but carefully rationed. The harvest, gathered with such hope in the autumn, is already dwindling, each sack of grain a lifeline that must stretch through months of scarcity. The granary, once a symbol of security, now holds only shadows of its former abundance, and the weight of that knowledge presses heavy on every heart. The livestock, vital to your family's survival, suffer alongside you, their coats matted with frost as they huddle in a barn that offers little shelter. Their low moans echo in the stillness, their breath steaming in the frigid air, a reminder of the shared struggle that binds human and beast in these harsh months. To venture outside is to face the wind's sharp sting, to feel the snow crunch beneath your boots as you trudge to gather firewood, your hands raw and chapped from the cold. This labor is backbreaking, each step a battle against the elements, but without a fire, your family will not survive the night. Picture a mother, her hands trembling as she stirs a pot over the fire, her eyes scanning the faces of her children, their cheeks hollow from hunger. She whispers stories to keep their spirits high, tales of spring's return, of fields green with new life. Her husband, weary from a day spent breaking ice to fetch water, carves a small toy from a scrap of wood, his fingers slow and clumsy in the cold. These small acts of love and care are lifelines, threads of hope woven into the fabric of a winter that seeks to unravel them. The village around them is a patchwork of similar scenes. Families huddled in their homes. Neighbors sharing what little they have, a bowl of thin soup, or a bundle of kindling passed from hand to hand. In this world, survival is a collective effort, a shared resolve to endure until the thaw. Disease was a constant shadow in these winter months, thriving in the cramped, smoky confines of peasant homes. The air, thick with the scent of unwashed bodies and burning wood, was a breeding ground for illness. A simple cold could turn deadly, its cough deepening into pneumonia that filled the lungs with fluid. Influenza swept through villages like a scythe, felling young and old with its fever and chills. In the winter of 1557, a particularly brutal strain of flu ravaged Paris, claiming thousands of lives in a matter of weeks. Families watched helplessly as loved ones weakened, their bodies too frail to fight the cold and sickness combined. Children, their small frames wrapped in thin cloaks, were especially vulnerable, their laughter silenced by fever or hunger. The elderly, their joints aching in the damp, faced each winter with a quiet dread, knowing their strength was fading. Yet, even in these dark moments, there was resilience. A mother brewing a tea of foraged herbs to soothe a fever, a neighbor braving the snow to check on a widow, a community holding fast to the belief that spring would come again. The struggle for warmth was as relentless as the fight for food. Firewood was a precious commodity, its gathering governed by strict laws that forbade taking more than the forest's fallen branches. A peasant family might huddle around a makeshift fire of dried dung or straw, its feeble heat barely enough to warm their hands. The task of collecting wood was grueling, requiring hours in the snow, hands blistered and raw. Yet it was a necessity that could not be ignored. Imagine a young boy, no more than 10, trudging through knee-deep drifts, his small arms laden with sticks, his breath puffing in the air as he hurries home to his family. His mother's grateful smile, the warmth of her embrace, is reward enough, a reminder that every effort, no matter how small, keeps the flame of survival burning. In the barn, the livestock share what little heat there is, their bodies pressed close, their breath a constant cloud in the icy air. The family's survival depends on these animals, yet their care is another burden, another task in a season that demands everything. The Little Ice Age, with its prolonged cold, made these struggles even more acute. Winters stretched longer, frosts lingered into spring, and the harvest yield grew ever more uncertain. In years of scarcity, entire villages faced the spectre of famines, their stores depleted long before the first green shoots appeared. The Great Famine of 1315, triggered by relentless rains and cold, saw crops rot in the fields, leaving families to scavenge what they could. Nettles, roots, even the bark of trees. Desperation drove some to unimaginable acts, stories whispered in hushed tones by the fire, a reminder of the thin line between survival and despair. Yet, even in these dire times, there were moments of humanity, a neighbor sharing a handful of dried peas, a village coming together to pool their resources, a monk offering shelter to those with nowhere else to turn. These acts, small but profound, were the embers that kept hope alive, warming hearts against the cold. As you listen, imagine yourself in that cottage, the fire's glow casting shadows on the walls, the soft creak of the wind outside a constant reminder of winter's presence. Picture the faces of the common folk, weathered by toil, yet lit with a quiet determination. Their lives were hard, their days filled with labor and uncertainties, but their spirits were unbroken. They found strength in the smallest things, a shared meal, a story told by the hearth, a moment of laughter amidst the cold. The medieval winter was a crucible, testing their endurance, but it also revealed their resilience, their ability to face the darkest seasons with courage and hope. Let this tale wrap around you like a warm cloak, carrying you deeper into the past, where the struggles of the common folk echo with the timeless strength of those who refuse to yield to winter's icy grasp. As the snow settles deeper around our imagined medieval village, cloaking the world in a soft, silent veil, let us draw near to the hearths where the common folk found warmth, not just in fire but in each other. Winter's icy grip may have tested their endurance, but it also wove threads of togetherness, binding hearts in ways that no cold could break. In this frozen season, when the days were short and the nights endless, the people of medieval Europe turned to rituals and celebrations, small beacons of joy that pierced the darkness. Picture the faint glow of candlelight spilling from a cottage window, the sound of laughter mingling with the crackle of a fire. As you nestle deeper into your blankets, let this gentle tale carry you into a world where community and celebration became lifelines, where the human spirit danced defiantly against the winter's chill. In the medieval world, life was governed by the rhythms of nature, and winter, though harsh, brought moments of respite through shared traditions. These were not grand affairs reserved for the wealthy, but humble gatherings rooted in faith, fellowship, and the need to endure. One such moment was the Feast of St. Stephen's, celebrated on December 26th, a day that broke the monotony of winter's toil with a burst of revelry. Imagine a village square, dusted with snow, where the people gather, their breath clouding in the frosty air, their faces lit with anticipation. The church bells ring out, their notes clear and bright, calling all to join in a day of turning the world upside down. On this feast, the rigid hierarchies of medieval life softened, and a peasant, chosen as the lord of misrule, donned a mock crown of straw and led the village in games and laughter. Children ran through the snow, their voices high and joyful, while adults shared stories and songs, their cares momentarily set aside. Picture a great hall, its walls hung with evergreen boughs, their scent mingling with the smoke of a roaring fire. The villagers, from the lowliest serf to the miller's family, crowd together on benches, their shoulders brushing as they pass wooden bowls of steaming pottage. The feast, though simple, feels like a banquet. Roasted meats, when available, are savoured slowly, their rich flavours a rare treat. Spiced pies, filled with dried fruits or preserved apples, are shared with care, each bite a reminder of summer's bounty. Wassail, a warm, spiced drink, flows from a communal bowl, its sweetness warming throats and hearts alike. A fiddler strikes up a tune, the notes weaving through the chatter, and soon, feet tap and hands clap, the rhythm pulling even the wariest into a dance. The Lord of Misrule, his face painted with suit for jest, calls out riddles and leads games, his laughter infectious, drawing smiles from even the most burdened souls. For one night, the weight of winter lifts, replaced by the warmth of shared joy. These celebrations were more than merriment, they were acts of survival, knitting the community together against the cold. In a small cottage, imagine a family welcoming a neighbour, their door creaking open to admit a figure bundled in a frost-covered cloak. The visitor carries a small gift, a bundle of kindling, a loaf of coarse bread, or a jar of preserved berries, and in return, they're offered a seat by the fire, a bowl of thin stew, a moment of connection. These small acts of charity were the heartbeat of the village, a reminder that no one faced winter alone. An elderly widow, her hands trembling with cold, might find a basket of firewood left quietly at her door, the giver long gone into the snowy night. A young mother, struggling to feed her children, might receive a handful of dried herbs from a neighbour, enough to flavour a pot of gruel and bring a smile to hungry faces. These gestures, born of necessities, were the threads that wove a community into a family, each act a spark of hope against the darkness. The church, too, played a central role in these winter gatherings, its stone walls a sanctuary from the cold. Imagine a small chapel, its interior aglow with the flicker of beeswax candles, their light dancing across the faces of the gathered faithful. The priest, his voice steady and warm, leads a prayer for strength, for warmth, for the promise of spring. The congregation, their cloaks dusted with snow, sing hymns that rise like smoke, their voices blending in a chorus of resilience. After the service, the doors open to the poor, offering a pallet of straw and a bowl of thin porridge to those with nowhere else to turn. Monks and nuns, their robes heavy with frost, move through the village, checking on the sick, delivering what little they can spare, herbs for a fever, a blanket for a shivering child. These acts of faith were a lifeline, a reminder that even in the bleakest months, there was a higher purpose, a shared belief that bound the community together. Beyond the feast of St. Stephen, other winter rituals brought light to the darkness. The 12 days of Christmas, stretching from Christmas to Epiphany, were a time of small joys, each day marked by a story, a song, or a shared meal. In some villages, villagers dressed in makeshift costumes, wandered from door to door, performing plays that mixed humour and folklore, their antics drawing laughter from weary hearts. Children, their cheeks red from the cold, played games in the snow, building figures from the drifts or tossing snowballs with gleeful abandon. These moments, though fleeting, were precious, a chance to forget the hunger and cold, to find joy in the simple act of being together. In the evenings, families gathered by the hearth, the elders spinning tales of heroes and saints, their voices a soothing balm against the wind's howl outside. These stories, passed down through generations, were a reminder of the past's triumphs, a promise that the present's struggles could be overcome. Imagine a young girl, her fingers wrapped around a warm mug of wassail, listening wide-eyed as her grandmother recounts the tale of a long-ago winter when the village survived a great snow. The old woman's voice, cracked but steady, paints a picture of neighbors sharing their last scraps of food, of a blacksmith forging tools to break the ice, of a community that refused to break. The girl, her eyes heavy with sleep, feels the warmth of her family around her, their presence a shield against the cold. Across the village, similar scenes unfold. Fathers teaching sons to carve wooden toys, mothers braiding daughters' hair by the fire, neighbors exchanging small gifts of dried apples or woven straw. These moments of connection, though simple, were profound, a testament to the strength found in unity. The winter may have been cruel, but the community's warmth was a fire that no frost could extinguish. In larger towns, the spirit of celebration took on a grander scale, yet still retained the intimacy of village life. Picture a market square, its cobblestones slick with ice, where a bonfire blazes at its center, drawing townsfolk like moths to a flame. Merchants, their stalls draped with holly, offer hot chestnuts and spiced cakes, their voices calling out over the chatter of the crowds. A troupe of jongleurs performs, their juggling and songs a welcome distraction from the cold. The town's guildhall, its doors thrown open, hosts a feast for all, where even the poorest are welcomed with a seat and a share of the bounty. The air is filled with the scent of roasting meat, the clink of mugs, the hum of voices raised in song. These gatherings, though larger, carried the same spirit as the village feasts. A reminder that winter's hardships were best faced together, that joy shared was joy multiplied. As you listen, let your mind wander to these scenes of celebrations, where the glow of a fire and the warmth of a shared meal pushed back the darkness. Picture the faces of the common folk, their eyes bright with laughter, their hands clasped in dance or prayer. The winter was a trial, but these moments of community were its antidote, a reminder that no one faced the cold alone. The Feast of Saints, Stephen, the 12 days of Christmas, the quiet acts of kindness. These were the sparks that kept the human spirit alight. Let this tale wrap you in its warmth, carrying you deeper into a world where the bonds of community shone brighter than the coldest winter night, where celebration was a defiant act of hope in the face of hardships. As the snow continues to blanket our imagined medieval village, softening the edges of a world locked in winter's embrace, let us turn our gaze toward the faint, flickering hope that sustained its people, the promise of spring. The long, dark months of cold have tested their endurance, their hearts burning low, their stores dwindling. Yet within every heart burns a quiet certainty that the season of renewal will come. Picture the village now, its rooftops heavy with snow, its paths buried, but its people watching the sky, the earth, the subtle signs that whisper of warmer days. As you settle deeper into your blankets, let this gentle tale carry you into a time when the first green shoots were a miracle, when the legacy of resilience was forged in the crucible of winter, and when the hope of spring was a beacon that guided the weary forward. In the medieval world, winter's grip seemed eternal, its icy fingers clutching the land with a tenacity that could break the strongest spirits. Yet, even in the darkest months, the people held fast to the knowledge that no season lasts forever. They watched for signs of spring with a patience born of necessity, their eyes scanning the horizon for the first hints of change. Imagine a farmer, his cloak tattered from months of battling the wind, standing at the edge of his fields, his breath clouding in the frosty air. He notices the days growing longer, the sun lingering a little higher in the sky, its rays carrying a faint warmth that kisses the snow. The icicles that hang from the eaves of his cottage begin to drip, each drop a soft note in a symphony of thaw. The earth, once hard as stone, softens underfoot, its surface yielding to the cautious steps of those who dare to hope. These small signs, so easily overlooked in our modern world, were to the medieval folk a lifeline, a promise that the cold would not have the final word. One of the most cherished rituals marking this transition was Plough Monday, celebrated on the first Monday after Epiphanies, a day when the village turned its eyes toward the fields and the work of renewal. Picture the scene: the snow has begun to melt, leaving patches of dark earth exposed, the air still sharp but carrying the faint scent of damp soil. The villagers gather in the square, their faces wary but bright with anticipation. The plough, a heavy wooden tool that has rested all winter, is brought forth, adorned with ribbons and sprigs of evergreen, a symbol of the life to come. The priest, his robes fluttering in the breeze, blesses the plough with a prayer, his voice steady and warm, invoking divine favor for the season ahead. The young men of the village, their laughter ringing out, take turns dragging the plough through the streets, a playful procession that fills the air with song and cheer. Children run alongside, their voices high and joyful, tossing handfuls of snow that will soon be gone. This ceremony, though simple, was a declaration of hopes, a collective act of faith that the earth would awaken, that the fields would yield once more. Imagine a young girl, her hands wrapped around a staff decorated with holly, watching wide-eyed as the plough passes by. Her mother, standing beside her, points to the first snowdrops pushing through the frosts, their delicate white petals a promise of life renewed. The girl's father, his hands rough from years of toil, joins the men in their processions, his heart lightened by the thought of planting seeds in soil no longer frozen. The village, so long hushed by winter's weight, comes alive with movement and sound. The creak of the plough mingling with the chatter of neighbors, their voices weaving a tapestry of hope. The first furrows cut into the earth are a victory, each slice of the plough a defiance of the cold that has held them captive. The act of turning the soil, of preparing the land for planting, is a ritual as old as times, a reminder that life persists, that spring always follows winter. The legacy of these medieval folk is one of resilience, a testament to the strength found in enduring the unendurable. Picture an elderly woman, her face lined with the marks of countless winters, sitting by the fire as she tells her grandchildren stories of survival. Her voice, soft and steady, recounts the great snows of her youth, when the village was buried for weeks. Yet no one went hungry, because neighbors shared their last scraps of bread. She speaks of the time a neighbor's barn burned, and the community came together to rebuild it, their hands blistered but their spirits unbroken. These stories, passed down through generations, are more than tales. They are the foundation of a legacy, a reminder that the human spirit can withstand even the harshest seasons. The children listen, their eyes heavy with sleeps, their hearts warmed by the knowledge that their ancestors faced the cold and emerged stronger, that they, too, carry that strength within them. In the towns, the promise of spring brought its own celebrations, a chance to shake off the weight of winter's confinement. Imagine a market square, its cobblestones slick with melting snow, where merchants set up stalls once more, their voices calling out as they offer the first greens of the season. Wild leeks, tender shoots, the bitter tang of early herbs. The air is filled with the scent of fresh, baked bread, a luxury after months of stale crusts, and the chatter of townsfolk eager to reconnect after weeks of isolation. A jongleur strums a lute, his song a hymn to the warming earth. While children chase each other through the square, their laughter a melody that rivals the birds returning to the trees. The church, its bells ringing with renewed vigor, hosts a service of thanksgiving, the congregation's voices rising in gratitude for the thaw, for the promise of abundance. These moments, though simple, were profound. A celebration of life's persistence, of a world reborn from the cold. As you listen, picture a family gathered in their cottage, the windows open to let in the first warm breeze, the air carrying the scent of wet earth and budding flowers. The mother, her hands no longer trembling with cold, kneads dough for a fresh loaf, her movements steady and sure. The father, his shoulders less stooped, carves a new handle for his plough, his thoughts on the seeds he will soon plant. Their children, freed from the confines of winter, run outside to chase the first butterflies, their laughter echoing across the fields. The village, so long silenced by snow, hums with life, its people moving with a purpose born of hopes. The legacy of their endurance is written in these moments, in the first furrows, the first blooms, the first songs of spring. They faced winter's wrath with courage, with community, with an unyielding belief that the seasons would turn, that life would go on. This legacy is a gift, a reminder that no winter, no matter how harsh, is eternal. The medieval folk, with their calloused hands and weary hearts, teach us that resilience is not just survival, but the act of finding joy in the face of hardships, of holding fast to hope when all seems lost. As the snow melts and the earth softens, imagine the villagers standing together, their faces turned toward the sun, their spirits lifted by the promise of renewal, the first green shoots, the first warm breeze, the first song of a bird returning from the south. These are the rewards for their endurance, the proof that their struggles were not in vain. Let this tale wrap you in its warmth, carrying you through a world where winter's end was a triumph, where the legacy of those who came before whispers of strength and hope. A gentle lullaby to guide you into dreams. Goad IGHT.